Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, nice to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Very good. You have a little announcement for us today?
Yeah, we had a great weekend. You know, we did the Friday show with Julian Assange as our interview, and it just went viral. The Drudge Report had it at the top of the Drudge Report. Zero Hedge, one of our favorite sites, had it very prominently displayed, and we've got many, many views. So if our audience has not seen it yet, please go to our YouTube page, youtube.com/Ron Paul Liberty Report, where you are right now, and watch the video. Let us know what you think about it.
Very good, and we do want to make sure our viewers know how happy we are with you joining us today, and anything you can do to help us along and share these programs would be very helpful. But today we want to talk about something very important, and that is the budget of the United States government. And they're a little bit behind for the 2017 budget. It's almost more than half over. 5 months to go, they have to start on next year. But they don't follow the rules of some people who have religious beliefs that you're supposed to take off on the Sabbath. Well, our government didn't take off on the Sabbath. They keep working at it. So they had this major meeting, the bipartisan meeting, Republicans and Democrats coming together, the bureaucrats and some very special people representing the executive branch as well as representing the Republican and the Democratic leadership. And they came up and they have a budget. What does it say? Another $1 trillion added on to the 2.5 up to $3.5 trillion approximately. And same old story, bipartisanship. Everybody screams and hollers for bipartisanship. And I have warned for so long, you really don't want bipartisanship unless they're doing the right thing. But when in my lifetime, especially the time I was in Washington, all bipartisanship led to more problems because they got together and they divvied up the loot. You take this and we take that. And this is exactly what they did on the weekend. The Republicans get the military money and the Democrats get the domestic money, but both sides are for both of them. There's this argument is a pretense. But one thing is the Freedom Caucus and the real good conservative libertarians had no representation. They have to be excluded. So they have been thrown out of the system because you can find enough creepy Republicans and creepy Democrats to get together and do this. So what all people have to do to see if what I'm saying is near the target is that Schumer sort of likes this bill, and Nancy Pelosi sort of likes the bill. They quoted those two more than any Republican. Of course, Paul Ryan likes the bill, too.
He likes it, too, of course. I remember the old days. This will probably go down in the history books. When I first started working for you on the Hill, we actually had appropriations. We actually did foreign affairs appropriations and defense appropriations. We spent a good part of the year actually working on these bills. It wasn't perfect, but when you think about what's come afterward. But this bill we have is a stopgap. It's going to save the country from government shutdown, which would, of course, be a tragedy. 1,600 pages. $1 trillion in spending. How many of those pages do you think will be read?
The military got what they want. And the military is represented especially by our president. He's minced no words. More, we have to rebuild it. We have an army bigger than everybody else put together almost. But we have to rebuild it, build more nukes. And, of course, if you look at the number of bombs that we have unleashed since this new administration came in, it's way above the previous one. And the other statistic that's coming out is there's been an attitude shift on this military. When Obama wanted to do something military, like drop more bombs on Syria or send troops to Syria, Republicans and conservative absolutely opposed to it. But now, statistically, their attitudes have tremendously changed. And now they say, go, 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 give them the money. And there's not very many Republicans now that would have any reservation about the militarism that is going on.
Our friend Bob Wenzel had a piece up at Target Liberty where he talks about the shifting attitudes of conservatives, of Republicans about war. And I think it was, as you point out, when Obama was bombing, I think only 40% supported it. But now that Trump's bombing, it's something in the 80s. Yeah. So it's a little depressing.
Well, the other thing is I'm not much of a supporter for the wall. I believe in borders, and I believe we can do a much better job. number one, I would give no benefits and no easy road to citizenship, people who break our laws and comes in. But nevertheless, people have been enthralled with building a physical wall, thinking that is a solution. And I think we heard about it in the campaign a little bit. We were going to get this wall, get it soon. The Mexicans are going to pay for it.
Yeah.
Guess what? They gave up on that really. They say, we don't need that money right now. We'll worry about that next year. But the loyalists, oh, well, that's okay. It's a tough system. We have to give up on the wall. Maybe we don't need the wall. I mean, not that I want the money for the wall, but people ought to wake up on what's happening. How can you trust what they say? It's the same old stuff. You hear the campaign slogans. And when I think of it in a military sense, I think about how Woodrow Wilson and FDR and even Nixon, we got to get out of these wars, and then they become the biggest warmongers of all. They do this. So they're saying these one things. And Trump, I like Trump because he said, let's approach this rather modestly, and reasonably with the Russians. They're not that bad of people. But where are we now? Just picking at each other and just throwing everything aside. The peace dividend actually never existed, but the little inclination toward peace after dropping out of the Soviet system, that's gone. That's gone. So it is a real shame on what's happening in our foreign policy today.
And on that same note, you'd pointed out this new budget contains $100 million in spending to create a special fund to counter Russian influence in Europe.
I wonder if that means they would be influencing elections or something like that. I mean, nobody's going to have an accounting of all this, I'm sure.
This is just more money for propaganda. It's going to produce a lot of jobs for propagandists. That's essentially what it's all about.
Sort of fall into the categories of the concerns of the founders. Stay out of entangling alliances with other nations, especially in Europe. Stay out of the politics of Europe, and yet here it goes. So, and there is no money there. It's all going to be debt. And, I hope the tax cuts come through, which on the short run, if they don't cut spending, that is another problem. You can't have magic recovery from the disastrous monetary policy by just cutting the taxes, because they have to cut the spending. And this is further proof that there is no appetite for spending. And as much as we can complain about the executive branch and the bureaucracy and the Congress, the House and the Senate, the people have a lot of responsibility for it too, because like you just pointed out, the shift in attitude, the Republicans and conservatives now all of a sudden like war and like dropping bombs, and we have to do it. I mean, they're determined to build up stature and be intimidated by Un. He's such a little wimp. Mm-hmm. And what is he going to do? Oh, I have a nuke, I'm going to get you. So, all he wants is attention, and they play into his hands. But that may get out of hand. I mean, we send our Navy over there, and who knows what will happen from that. But I think we do exactly what he wants, because he's on the top of the news around the world. He's the worst guy in the world. Okay. And that's the way these psychopaths are. They enjoy that kind of thing.
We put a piece up on the Institute website written by Adam Gary, and he says the two narratives about North Korea can't both be true. One of them is he's extremely dangerous, the most dangerous person in the world. He has nukes, he has a huge army. And on the other hand, they're totally impoverished. They've got no money. They can't turn on the lights. They're totally weak. The weapons that they put in their parades are phony. So the two of them can't be right. Something is awash in the narrative.
Well, I'll bet you know what happened to Planned Parenthood. We were going to get rid of that. Republicans were going to get rid of that. Did they achieve the goal, or did they come up short?
No cuts. No
cuts
to
in Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
Well, another two groups that they wanted to get rid of was the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities. Didn't get rid of that either.
Spending increase on those two.
Spending increases.
Yeah, they got more money.
A fiscal conservative could get discouraged by this. I wonder where they go if they decide Republicans aren't conservatives or not. I guess some of them joined the Freedom Caucus, but we hear that they're going to have to go along with some of these capitulations with the Obamacare and so-called getting rid of it. That remains to be seen. We do know the good guys up there, and we know how much they're frustrated, but we need more people outside of Washington sending a message. When the right message is sent, these guys in Washington, they want their job, but if they know that they can best be rewarded by spending somebody else's money, borrowing the money, or printing the money, they're going to do it. And that's why this was not. You didn't need to be a genius to predict this was coming.
Yeah.
I mean, but this is not being really astute. This is the way it works. This is what happens when you have pure democracy, where people get to vote largesse for themselves, and that's how they get rewarded. Then you get the powerful special interests and the lobbyists. They run things. So the Constitution doesn't run anything at all. It's just shunned. I wonder how many infractions there are on the Constitution if you went out and dissected this bill out. I imagine there'd be very little of that money that the people who wrote the Constitution would say, oh, that's legitimate, that's legitimate. But most of this, they say, this is ridiculous, especially because it's running up the debt.
It would be a good exercise to go through it. The other thing that stood out to me is $15 billion in supplemental spending to, quote, fight terrorism. And this reminds me of what our friend Chuck Spinney would call the self-licking ice cream cone, because essentially our policies in the Middle East do nothing but create terrorism, and in Central Asia create terrorism, bombing, dropping these big bombs, invading Syria. It creates terrorism. We're we're fighting alongside with Al-Qaeda in Syria. They're our nominal allies. So we spend money to fight terrorism, but in the fight, we create more terrorism, which then requires more money to fight terrorism, on and on and on.
It never stopped. Paul Ryan's statement was that the funding bill makes America stronger and safer. I'd like to see a headline someday that defunding has just made America freer. I mean, that would be astute. That would be what we need. And all of a sudden, prosperity would break out and peace would break out. But there's too many special interests around the world, domestically, in the military-industrial complex, that thrive on war or potential war, and this pretense that there is many Hitlers out there that if we don't stop them tomorrow, they're going to be on our shores and they're going to start bombing us, and we have no other choice in the world because we have this moral obligation. We are exceptional Americans. We know what is right. It is our duty to do this, and if we don't, we're derelict in our duty. For some reason, it always backfires. Ever since Woodrow Wilson, it's backfired. He introduced this whole notion that we have this moral obligation to make the world safe for democracy. Yeah, it's sure been safe in the last 100 years, and until we reverse our beliefs, it's going to get less safe, less free, and more impoverished. And we're moving along. I think what happens at the end of a cycle like this, it accelerates toward the end, just like inflation. Inflation can creep along at a certain level and up, and then the final blow-off, in a Zimbabwe type of inflation in Venezuela, it goes. The confidence is lost, and it just goes sky high. And that's what can happen here. The confidence will eventually be lost. So all this is just gimmickry. They're defying all moral law, all constitutional law, all economic law, and they do it without a complaint. Well, this will work. We know what we're doing. People need to be taken care of. Everybody has to have a safety net, and we're the ones who do it. We have these people who believe that, that the elitist viewpoint, we believe we're elite and can tell the world what to do. And then you have the liberal domestic who believes they're elite too. And if you didn't give them free medical care and didn't give them Obamacare, et cetera, there would be no medical care. There's no evidence that that's what happened before Obamacare, nor is there any evidence that that is what would happen if they finally decided that the marketplace is how you distribute goods and services the most efficiently.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier on the tax cut plan, and our friend David Stockman, who was, I think, pretty optimistic about President Trump in the early days, he seems to have soured a little bit. And if you'll indulge me, I wouldn't mind reading a quote, because I think this captures the tax fight, the budget we're talking about today. Here's what he has to say about President Trump. The president is essentially a 70-year-old kid in a candy store who wants one of everything. More for defense, veterans, border walls, law enforcement, infrastructure, and phenomenal tax cuts too, without the inconvenience of having to pay for it. I think it was a very astute observation.
But what he's doing, he's a good observer. He's observing what's happening. But there were individuals, especially if they belonged to the Austrian School of Economics, that made these predictions and projections on what happens. You know, Hayek did it, the road to serfdom. They showed what happened. Mises was fantastic on this, and he related it to monetary policy. All these things are reliant on a central bank and a monetary system that inflates the currency. And it's been known, in a theoretical sense, for 100 years or so. Mises knew exactly what would happen, and it's arriving here. And people are starting to panic, and they can be convinced that they have to become more militant, either at home or abroad. Even though there's been a movement with a more sane policy on drugs, there's more money in here for the drug enforcement. There's an epidemic. Yeah, there's an epidemic, but there's a lot of other reasons for that. It's not a lack of... The epidemic in drugs didn't occur because the government wasn't doing enough or not spending enough money and dealing with these problems. It has a lot of factors to it. But more money there, that's supposed to solve the problem. And if you don't support it, you don't care. You're un-American, you're unpatriotic, you don't care about this, and people get convinced of that. Except the people we talk to, because I talk to plenty of them on college campuses, and in spite of all this problem, there's a lot of young people starting to realize this is not a viable system. It's not going to be around that much longer, and we need to think about these other ideas.
And as you say, we should be inspired to work twice as hard, because when the system collapses, we need to have something to put in place, to offer to put in place.
There you go. And I would say that the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity, that you are the chief executive officer. You're doing a great job in promoting that, and we want to continue to do it. And I want to thank the viewers today for tuning in to this important program. It's too bad I couldn't say, well, this is great news, a bipartisan agreement. Everything is going to be okay. The budget's going to be balanced. You're going to have more freedom. Your taxes are going to go down. Don't worry about it. Well, unfortunately, that's not going to happen. The one little tidbit, even though there's a lot of shortcomings, if you just get lower taxes, it might help a little bit, but it might make things worse, like David Stockman suggests. If you just get the tax cuts and all this spending, the deficit could get worse. We have to change our attitudes about what the role of government ought to be. If the government is supposed to be there to provide a safety net for everything that we do domestically, and to provide our interference around the world to create peace and prosperity, believe me, it's not going to last in its end. We have to decide what we want. Do we want to continue to do that and run this country into total bankruptcy with the destruction of all our liberties, or are we going to say, you know what, we can have peace and prosperity and do much better by honoring and respecting the moral basis and the moral understanding of what liberty is all about? That is the goal we should all seek. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.